Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Welcome to Dev with Excel. All right, so previously we were able to look at exercises 1 and 2, which we successfully implemented their codes, right? Okay, so today we are going to be looking at exercise 1.3, right? Okay, so this is the part 1. Under the part 1, we are dealing with course information. Okay, so exercise 1.3, let's read what we have here. This says we continue building the application that we started working on in the previous exercises. So you can write the code into the same project since we are only interested in the final state of the submitted applications. All right, so the way I actually did mine, I submitted each of the exercises, not just the final code implementation. I sectioned them by exercises, right? So that's what I did. All right. So moving on to instruction, the instruction for 1.1, it says, let's move forward to using objects in our application. Modify the variable definitions of the app component as follows, and also refactor the application so that it still works. Okay, so how do we make this work still? We need to make this work, right? Okay, so here previously we have part 1 as a variable for a string, right? Then we have exercises as a variable for numbers such as 10, 7, and 14. But now, name and exercises are now put as objects, right? These are now objects, and these objects are assigned a variable called part 1, part 2, and part 3 respectively. Okay, so let's head to the code implementation and see what we need to do. All right, so previously we worked on step 1 and then step 2. So I have created another code file for step 3, right? So we are currently in step 3 now. So I'll simply just copy this part and I'll seed into this. Okay, so let's see how we can run this code. npm run dev. Okay, all right. So let's go to the browser to confirm that our application is still running the way we left it, right? So this is how we left it in step 2, right? So it was this way in step 2. Now let's try to implement the code for exercise 1.3. That is step 3. All right. So going to the SLC folder, we are concerned with the app.jsx. I'm simply going to close this part since our application is already running. Also close this part, then I'll come here. So here we need to go back to the question and copy this. So we were asked to put all of these into the app component. We already have course already there. So let's just copy from part 1 to part 3. Okay, all right. So we simply just come here. I'm not going to delete these ones yet. I'm just going to comment them because they might still be useful. Then I come here to paste what we have now. Okay, so here we can see that we have objects, no longer strings and numbers, right? So we have part 1. Inside part 1, we have name and exercises. We have part 2, we also have name and exercise, and so for part 3. All right, so let's go to the first component we have. We have the header component, right? I think this is still okay. We can still leave the header this way. I believe so because we have the course variable inside the app already. So let's just leave the header this way. But this part component, I think it's not necessary. Let's comment it. Like I said, the reason why I'm not deleting them yet is because we might still have a need for them if our code does not run as expected, right? So when you are coding, it's not like a one size fits all, right? You are trying to solve a problem, and don't be too confident that you begin to delete things out of your code. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we are as well going to be taking out these variables, const the part 1, exercise 1, and so on. Let's comment them out since we are not going to be using them anymore. Also, we comment this out also. Then eventually when we are through with the code implementation, that's after it's running fine, we go back to delete all these parts that are comments, right? Okay, so we need to pass a props parameter to component props. And while we are here, we need to return the props of each of the given variables we have here, the variables for the objects, right? So here we simply come here and we create a p tag because we need to place the properties and its values in p tag, right? So what do we want to return? We need to return the parts and the exercises. Therefore, we simply just come here and say props dot parts. Let's call this parts, and then we give a space, and then we say props dots. Let's not make the mistake we made previously. Now let's copy the variable name so that we won't be having too much of mistakes. All right, so now we have parts and exercises as properties, right? So we save our code, and then this is what we'll be returning for the content property, for the content components. Yeah. All right, so let's go to the app component, which is the root component, and see what we need to do. All right, so mm, what we need to do now under this app is we need to call out each of these keys in the object, right? You know, name here is a key, while the fundamentals of React is its value. So this is a key value pair, right? Okay, so let's simply come to content here and write out the property name. Let's go back to what we call the property name. Here, the property name here for the content is parts and exercises. Let's take note. So here we simply come here and write parts equals curly brace. Now, what do we pass into this curly brace? We need to pass in the values we have, which is here. Now, we want to pass in fundamentals of React, right? Therefore, we are going to call name, which is a key in part1 object. So we simply say part1 dot name, not parts, rather part1. All right, so this handles the aspect of part1. Then the next we need to do is to also call out the exercises, right? Let's see the name we gave the props. We called it exercises. So we come here and then write exercises is equal to curly brace. Then what do we need to do? We need to say part1 dot exercises. So this becomes part1 dot exercises, right? So we copy this twice and then we change the part1 and exercises. We change the part1 to part 2 and part 3 respectively. So let's copy this and paste into more areas. Okay, so here we change this part 1 to part 2. We also come here, we change this part 1 to part 2. Then we come here and change this part 1 to part 3. And also we come here and change this part 1 to part 3 as well. Right? Now, this should work fine. Let's save it and see if our code runs fine. Okay, our code is not complete, so we have nothing returned. All right, so let's continue. So the next thing we need to do is, I think we are through with the content property, the content components rather. So what we need to do next is work on this total. How do we work on this total? Let's bring down this one. Like I said, we've been needing this. You can see why we actually did not delete this. So let's remove the comments. And then how can we target this exercise one? What we can do here is looking at total components here. We have props, that's prop.sum of exercises, right? So what we can do here is since exercises 1, 2, and 3 are all inside part 1, 2, and 3 objects, right? we can call them out using the object names. So here we simply say part 1, then we place it here and then put a dot. That's part 1 dot exercises, no longer exercise 1 but exercises, because we have exercises which is here inside part 1, which is this. So we do the same thing here. We change part 1 to part 2, then we put a dot that's trying to call out its keys, right? Okay, all right. So the next thing we do is we'll change this part 1 here to part 3, put a dot, and then remove this 3, right? Now let's save this code and check if our code runs well. Okay, so we can see that we have our code running very well, just like it has been, but our code has been modified, right? Such that now we are working with objects and no longer just strings and integers as it were. So the next thing we need to do is, after we are through with these comments, we remove all these comments, right? Since our code is working very fine now, we are now confident to remove these comments. Okay, so I'm simply going to take out all of the comments and take out this extra space. Also come here, take out this comment as well. And I think that's what we have here. Okay, so let's confirm again. Let's check our code again if it runs well. Okay, yes, so our code runs very well, right? We have the parts names and the part exercises, and we have the sum of all the exercises we have. Okay, so this works well, and this is for step 3, which is exercise 1.3 of the course info. Thanks for having me today, and see you in the next video. Bye.